I'm often asked, what does it feel like to float next to the eye of an inquisitive 40-ton whale? And whenever I'm asked that question, I think of one whale in particular, one that I've come to know as an individual. And specifically, it was the first day we met. I entered the water to observe him from a distance, and he immediately swam over to me with his lower jaw open. There it is. There was little time for me to return back to the boat. Or actually, I wonder if I should give him time. No? There it is. Yay! That really helps. So there was very little time for me to return back to the boat. Actually, there was no time. So with this coming towards me, this sight, I just remained still and awaited his arrival. His head is about this high, and it came right up to me about this far away before brushing up against my body. And I put my hand on his head and gently pushed away, and as I'd done so, he heeled over 45 degrees and then came towards me for a closer look. I remember taking a moment to look down between my legs to make sure my feet would not come into contact with his lower jaw, which was still open just beneath my body. As I turned back up to look at his eye, I wondered if he was testing me. He's a sperm whale. He's the largest toothed predator on the planet. And he's also a complex social animal who possesses the largest brain ever to exist on Earth. His kind have been in existence for over 5 million years, a considerably longer time than our 200,000-year-old fossil record. As I brought the camera to my eye and to his eye and completely turned my trust over to him, the only word that comes to mind in that moment is that it's disturbing. It's the realization that we're not alone in the universe, coupled with the awareness that we may lose in our lifetime over 5 million years of evolving culture and communication in the largest and possibly most complex brain ever to exist on Earth. This is what compels me most of all. The most troubling element in creating these photographs, well, actually, let me back up. My journey as an artist has led me to create photographs of whales that are on their scale, both in terms of size and a level of detail. For me, it's a starting point to provide the world with a visceral memory of what a whale really looks like. And so the most troubling element in creating these photographs is proximity. The water column washes everything out. And so to capture their true colors, the subtle tone changes and the fine detail, in particular in their eye, my camera can be no further than 6 feet away from them. And for this practice to be safe and sustainable, I must wait for them to come to me. To arrive at those moments, I'll invest anywhere from 5 weeks to 3 months with specific groups of whales, where I'll work to come to know many of them as individuals. But the real goal for me, however, is to explore the possibility of them coming to know me as an individual and the potential to cultivate a deeper level of acceptance and curiosity from them. Here I am with that whale I just mentioned, but this is 2 years later, and this is where I've composed my largest photograph so far. And this is what's taking place beneath the surface. He was kind enough to provide me with a 4-minute sitting where I composed over 140 photographs along the length of his body. Those photographs are brought together onto a massive digital canvas and blended together by hand, a process that can take over 200 hours. I just finished it last February, and when it's printed and mounted, it will measure 10 by 36 feet and weigh nearly 1,200 pounds. It's not so much the scale, but it's the detail that's most important to me, and viewers will be able to appreciate from inches away. The idea to create such photographs is not my own, and instead, it is born from a place of holding the mantra, I don't know, and keeping it at the center for many years. I don't know creates space for that which is beyond our imagination. And so with the whales, I try not to impose any modern presumptions or expectations on them, and I work to provide them with sufficient space and time to explore any natural curiosity they may have towards me. The uncertainty of this practice can take a tremendous toll on a person, both financially and emotionally. Our world favors a profitable end in almost all major creative and experimental endeavors, if for any reason, to simply survive. But whales don't operate that way. And if you want to see more of what they can offer, you have to be willing to work with them in ways that defy common sense in our world. And after 4 years of effort, I still didn't know. And this process was beginning to take a significant toll on me that eventually cost my marriage. And on a very difficult night, I made the decision to give up. The very next day, I went out to sea to spend my final week in the South Pacific with the humpback whales. And by the end of the day, I was floating above a mother and calf. An event was about to unfold, one that would shine a light on what I had been waiting for. They came towards me, and the calf swam right to me on a collision course, and he veered away at the last moment. And I was worried that he would bump my camera, so I lowered it. And immediately before me, I was blown away by the sight of a belly button of a humpback whale, just beyond an arm's reach away. And I had never been so close to a whale before, and I could really appreciate the fine color and all the detail. I could see his skin and musculature move and flex over his frame as he powered down his fluke one more time. And this infant, this 6-week-old whale, had the mind-body awareness to bring that fluke a forearm's length by my mask. I felt there was something there to that moment. I never would have dared to swim that close to him, and so they had come to me and showed me something. And as I floated at the surface trying to process this, another moment would pass before it would all be brought to light. And it began with a single firm but gentle tap on my shoulder. It was too solid of a tap to be human, and with the camera to my side, I turned to look and was eye to eye with the mother. She had extended her 15-foot-long, 2-ton pectoral fin to touch me with the very tip of it to let me know she was behind me. I ended up in between her and her calf, which isn't recommended. And she could easily have broken my back, and I found myself trembling from her restraint. I had never been this close to an adult whale's eye before. And in that, her calm, heavy-lidded, mindful gaze was looking back up at me, and the sun was behind me, so it was fully illuminated. And in that instant, I saw clearly what had been missing in our 40 years of collective effort to inspire wider audiences. Moments such as those, documented on their scale, but most importantly on their terms. When it's on their terms, it's reflected in the eye, and that is absolutely pivotal. I went back to the boat to collect my thoughts. I climbed up to the flybridge to be alone. I had to make sense of this moment. I was thinking of quitting, and I wanted to listen to my intuition, my inner voice. And all that kept coming back was, you have to leave home. You have to leave all that is safe and familiar. And I knew to be present for that kind of event again, I would need to invest entire seasons, up to 3 months for several years, to not only be present for such an event, but to learn how to document it. How do I recreate these sensations for others to experience? And whether it was right or wrong, it was powerful and clear, and led me to quit my job, sell the place where I lived, sell my car, and raise enough funding for 124 days of field work across 2 field seasons. And by the end of those 124 days, with only weeks left, I had nothing to show for my efforts. There were many opportunities to learn, but came with many mistakes. And on another very difficult night, laying in bed in the darkness, feeling nothing but anxiety pumping through my bloodstream, I didn't sleep at all that night, and I wanted to quit yet again. We went out to sea the following morning, and within a few hours, I was floating above another mother and calf, all the while feeling nothing but sadness and regret for all these decisions I had made. This is the mother. This was the last photograph I took in this moment. You can see the white in her eye. That's a sign of distress or concern. And these are the expressions I talk about when it's not on their terms, when something's going on. Before I could respond to that expression, I felt a presence behind me, and my body moved forward like this at the surface. I strained to look up and saw the underside of a whale come over the top of my head. It was the calf, and he rested his belly against my back. You can see his chin right there. And then he brought with the camera over here, he brought his left pec fin over and brought it against my chest and held me against his belly. And we floated there together for a few moments while I breathed through my snorkel and he breathed through his blowhole. My assistant kindly swam up, grabbed my arm, and gently separated us so I wouldn't have to disturb him, or startle him, I should say. And the very next day, I composed what would be my only life-size photograph of a whale. There he is. He swam up to me less than 3 feet away, so close that he touched my thigh with his pectoral fin. And weeks later, I returned back to the States. I sold my underwater camera gear and eventually my boat to print and mount the body of work produced during this time as a way to keep the vision alive and growing. And during that time, I often thought of this whale. This is the mother. This is the photograph where I realized 12 feet is too far away to make a life-size photograph. There are simply too few pixels for her eye, and the tones and details all fall apart when you bring her to life-size dimensions. During that time, it would be another 2 years working full-time without pay before I could return to sea. And I think what I thought about most during that time were the moments where I'd wake up in the night and immediately feel the dread at the thought of having to wait for a whale to come to me 6 feet away, a whale that can weigh anywhere from 8 to 150 tons. I still had a lot to learn, but most of all, I had to learn to trust them. After 6 years from the moment of inspiration, my vision to share in meaningful ways finally began. And to see if this body of work had the potential to affect the changes I envisioned, I wanted to share with what I felt would be the most challenging audiences, those living in countries that commercially hunt whales. I felt that if my work showed promise in these countries, then it might prove viable to help address the far more serious global scale issues these creatures face, in particular, entanglement in commercial fishing gear, where every day nearly 1,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises drowned in nets. As my fears to work closely with whales were put to rest over time, so too were my fears to share in countries such as Norway and Japan. This is Ella. She's an adult dwarf minke whale from Australia. She spent 5 days with me and as many as 6 days, or 6 hours in a day at our anchorage. And these composite photographs of her were made just weeks before my very first show overseas in Norway. I partnered with a Norwegian nonprofit who had been working on the whaling issue for over 20 years, and they were kind enough to help me prepare for the experiences that I might face. None of us knew what to expect. One of the ways was they provided me with a 4-page document on all the questions that have been asked of them in the 20 years, questions that could be provocative or contentious. But despite all of the media coverage in print and on television, none of these questions were asked. The work had managed to draw out curiosity and fascination from journalists and from the public, which allowed for a whole new dialogue to begin. And this is something that the nonprofit had never experienced before and came to a complete surprise to me. We received over 2,000 people at our first 2-day show in Oslo and received over 90% positive media coverage. 4 more shows would follow in Norway, all with the same response, even when one show was in a city with an active whaling fleet. And all this held true in Japan. I'm touching upon a way to spark unexplored thought and emotion, and I'm working to bring it to the rest of us now. There's more that I'm working to realize and share. Imagine being able to have the luxury to walk the length of a 90-foot wide photograph of a blue whale in macro level detail. I want to give you the memory of the expression in the eye of the largest creature ever to exist on Earth. With over 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises dying each year in commercial fishing gear for the food we eat, I want to provide us with a memory of what a living whale looks like entangled in fishing gear. I want to put this issue visually in our own hands, for we are the ones who ultimately can affect meaningful and lasting change just by making very small changes in our lifestyle choices and our behaviors. But collectively, it's huge. During the course of this work, I've discovered many of the problems whales face. And what I've learned, what's more troubling to me is what I've discovered back home. I learned firsthand how scarce resources are to support creativity and innovation that benefits humanity and nature. And what's more troubling to me is that we seem to rarely question this. We accept scarcity. And in my field alone, we've explored less than 5% of the world's oceans and may already have lost more than we'll ever know. With whales, I don't know has been replaced with a knowing. But on this larger issue, I don't know remains at the center. More than anything, I just wish to serve as a reminder of what is possible when we choose to listen and follow what's in our heart, even when it's scary. And in light of all these realizations, what fascinates me most of all now is the thought of what's in your heart. What is it in you that might be being held back, that you might not even be aware of, perhaps because it's been buried for so long? More than anything, I would love to help inspire that shift in us. I want to know, what is your whale? Thank you.